All right, let's delve into the conversation. We have in the studio Air Commodore Kenneth Oyeng. He's the Director, Search and Rescue from the National Emergency Management Agency. Thank you very much for joining us, Air Commodore.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Good evening, Nigerians. It's a pleasure to be here once again.
We're glad to have you. And we also have Mr. Stephen Jabbo. He is a technical advisor to the Director General, Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Jabbo.
Thank you for having me, and good evening, our viewers.
We're pleased to have you, and I'll just start with you, Mr. Jabbo, right away. Going by the weekly, or should I say monthly, flood prediction by the agency, talking about NIHSA now, you brought out states that will be impacted. You brought out the impact, the severity, and of course, recommendations. What is expected to be done with these documents, especially by disaster managers?
Thank you very much. The Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, in fulfillment of its mandate of flood forecasting and issuing of early warning, comes out with what we call annual flood outlook, since after the devastating flood of 2012. From that year, 2013, the agency began to publish the annual flood outlook for the country. Now, this annual flood outlook gives detailed flooding scenario that is expected in the country from the month of April to November. This publication also gives the magnitude of the flooding that are expected to happen, the time it is expected to happen, and the locations that the flooding are expected to happen. Now, if you all recall, this year, the 2025 annual flood outlook was unveiled by the Honorable Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Professor Joseph Talumin Utsef, on the 10th of April 2025 at the Abuja Continental Hotel. Now, the highlight of that flood outlook for this year were that about 1,249 communities in 176 local government areas in 30 states plus FCT falls within the high flood risk areas. Similarly, more communities in more local government areas in 36 states and FCT also falls within the moderate flood risk areas. Now, flooding has been a perennial problem in Nigeria, and it is not as if we cannot find solution to it. There are solutions to it. The question is, if you want to find solution, permanent and endurable solution to a recurrent problem, first of all, you have to know what causes that problem. Now, flooding is caused by a combination of factors, both natural and human activities.
Indeed, Mr. Jabbo, these factors have been there. And I must commend the agency, for this timely flood-focused, innovation, looking at, specifics and also community-based assessment, which brings me to Air Commodore. When a prediction like this, which we've not seen happen before, the specifics are there in the document, what is the agency now, talking about NEMA, going to do in terms of, I know you've been carrying out awareness on early warning, early warnings, but it calls for early action since there is a specific situation we're dealing with now.
Okay, thank you very much once again, Ruth. Before I go ahead, let me on behalf of my DG, Mrs. Zubaida Umar, extend our sympathy to communities, families across the country, especially in states like Kogi and Kebbi, who have suffered the devastating effects of flood. And I want to assure you that the federal government of Nigeria, through the National Emergency Management Agency, in collaboration with your various states, will continue to work around the clock to ensure that you get the needed support to get back your means of livelihood. Now, having said that, I want to state that immediately the NIHSA sends out their annual flood outlook, NEMA immediately goes into preparations like you observed by sending, first and foremost, the DG communicates this message to the various states, highlighting the communities that are going to be affected, depending also on the severity of the flood. Immediately that is done, the NEMA Department of Disaster Risk Reduction goes out, sensitizing the public on what they need to do, especially those whose settlement is around areas that are going to be flooded. And subsequently, the Department of Search and Rescue, where I belong, as part of our flood preparedness exercise, the DG NEMA emphasized that this time around we must ensure that those at the receiving end of this flood, that is the families, must be carried along in preparations against this flood. So that's why this time around we conducted flood simulation exercises. We started with one in Odekwe community in Ogbaru local government area of Anambra State. From there we moved, of course, to Wudil local government area in Kano State. During these simulation exercises, we engage with the communities, we engage with families, we engage with them to see their level of preparedness, their protocols, their procedures. We want to see their communication system, their lines of communication. We want to see the emergency items which they are put in place to ensure that they are ready for this flood. Because no matter what we do, although my colleague has said that floods can be prevented, but I want to say that it is relative. There are some states that are along the coast. As the water levels continue to rise around the world, as the ice in the glaciers continue to melt, water levels will rise, rains will continue to fall.
Yeah.
And as such, those states along the coastal region will continue to experience flood. Well, so far, this is what NEMA is doing to ensure that we alleviate the suffering of Nigerians as much as possible. We also go as far as providing relief materials to the affected communities. Just on Friday, the DG NEMA was in Kebbi State, where she presented relief materials to victims of flood in Kebbi State.
Okay.
Yes, these are
Air
part
Commodore,
of the...
yes, these are strategies post, that is after the disaster. What is the response you're getting going by your early warning signals? Very briefly.
Right. When we get these early warnings, first and foremost, we usually prefer that these communities that are identified, we usually prefer that they relocate to higher grounds. But we know the situation in Nigeria. Most communities, most people will tell you that they cannot afford to leave their immediate vicinity and move to higher grounds. They cannot afford land on higher grounds. So in that case, what do? We continue to advise them to take mitigating measures, to take preventive measures, and we also engage with stakeholders. Recently, we learned that the Niger Delta Development Commission built what is known as a safe house in Yenagua, Bayelsa State. The safe house is a place where, when flood comes in, so members of the affected communities move to this safe house where they are able to stay there, keep them away from the flood until when the waters recede before they can go back to their various communities. So these are measures that are being put in place to ensure that families overcome this flood. And as much as possible, the aim of our simulation exercise with the communities is to build community resilience.
Yes.
To ensure that the communities are able to withstand the effects of this flood and get back to their means of livelihood as soon as possible.
And talking about resilience, we're seeing NIHSA taking that bold step to, see that Nigeria surmounts this challenge. We'll pick up with the conversation. Mr. Jabbo, we'll be right back after this break. Thank you for staying with us. The Bayelsa State government, through relevant ministries and agencies we hear, have kick-started clearing and opening of drains and canals within the state as part of mitigation measures in response to NIMET's warning of possible flooding in the state. Aya Prezi reports.
As the rains are here again in full torrents, with the likelihood of possible flooding perennially experienced in the state, mitigation efforts are no doubt expected. To this effect, clearing of drains and canals has been activated by relevant agencies of the state government to minimize flooding as predicted by NIMET.
We are very early in taking proactive measures and opening up most of the canals and drainages, which we as a board sanitation committed to our environment try to also link to the plan by also cleaning up the micro drainages that collects water from our environment to the canals and then to the big rivers.
So we know that the monster flood is coming all the way from the Footage Island, Cameroonian axis. When the Lagdo Dam is overwhelmed and they release water, it comes down here. And so we expect the federal government to go back to the Hausa Dashi Dam. So the federal government should play its own part, while the states and local governments will also be expected to be playing their own part.
Meanwhile, shoreline protection works are said to be ongoing in few communities to prevent floodwaters from the rivers gaining access into them. In Yenagoa, Aya, Prezi, NG News.
And in Jabbo State, we hear the state government has continued to put control measures in place to prevent repeat of such devastating impact of flooding in the state. Our correspondent, Danjuma Miyaki, takes a look at these flood control measures in the state.
Floods are a natural disaster that can strike anywhere at any time, often triggered by heavy rainfall, overflowing rivers, and poor drainage systems. To tackle this, the Jigawa State government has stepped up efforts to protect communities. In addition to dredging rivers and building embankments, the government this year awarded contract worth 3 billion naira for the construction of drainage system and embankment in 13 flood-prone local government areas.
What contributes or what exacerbates the flooding issue as far as river flooding is concerned is this illegal breakage of the riverbanks. The last time we have seen more than 300 illegal breakages. For what? They want the water to access their farmlands for irrigation purposes.
Anthropogenic issues is what is agitating, facilitating the issue of climate change. But in natural course, high rainfall will bring flooding. But when you have additional issues such as this, high rain-off generated as a result of concretization of the surfaces, then what will happen? We will have more water flowing on the surface.
While the destructive power of flood cannot be eliminated, communities can be better prepared and protected through continued investment, planning, and collaboration.
Okay, so Mr. Jabbo, you've seen the report from Bayelsa and Jigawa State, which brings me to this question. I know you're having interagency collaboration, but now you have a document that is specific to states and local government areas. How are you working with state governments, to ensure that this mitigation is ensured?
The outcome of our flood outlook are communicated to the various state government, giving details of the communities that are likely to be affected by flooding. Now, when these alerts are given out, we expect the various state government, the state emergency management agencies, local government management agencies, non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, to carry on there with mitigation measures. What we have seen in Bayelsa is being very proactive because they are doing the right thing. Bayelsa State, by virtue of its location, suffers from two types of flooding: coastal flooding and riverine flooding. Now, what they are doing is the right thing. And in addition to that, we expect the dredging of the river, because the River Niger and Benue, with its tributaries, flows into Bayelsa and ultimately into the Atlantic Ocean. Because of the flat topography of Bayelsa State, the flood waters find it difficult to easily drain off. So the solution, in addition to what they are doing, is to create safe flood corridors where those that are vulnerable to flooding will be evacuated and kept there. Construction of more drainage systems.
Yeah.
They are expected to do that. And again, the silting or dredging of the rivers so that the the water carrying capacity of the rivers will be enhanced. Now in Jigawa State, Jigawa suffers particularly from 4 types of flooding: riverine flooding, flash flooding, urban flooding, and dam water release. Similarly, because of the terrain of Jigawa State is a flat terrain, you go there, you see that there are a lot of wetlands that have been developed. Year in, year out, we have seen how roads and bridges were cut in Jigawa State, farmlands submerged. So the mitigation measures that are expected to be taken in Jigawa State, because I recall the Director General of NIHSA, including myself, we paid a courtesy call on the Governor of Jigawa State to follow up on the issue of flood mitigation in the state. And one of the area of collaboration is that we are embarking jointly with the Jigawa State government as well as Kogi State government on National Flood Insurance Program. Because every year, some specific communities, they suffer the impact of flooding. So NIHSA is collaborating with these 2 state governments and some insurance companies to identify particular victims of flooding in particular communities with a view to offering financial assistance so that their loss can be minimized.
Okay, Mr. Jabbo, you're talking about posts now, that is for communities who have been affected.
Yes.
I remember that insurance was launched during the unveiling of the annual flood outlook presentation.
Yes.
But let me get to Air Commodore. Now we're dealing with a situation where, you know, it requires a coordinated approach. If we're talking flood management, effective flood management in the country. You've been on the field, you're still going to be on the field. How is the agency taking from past, or rather learning from past experiences to ensure that the contingencies that could be in place to hinder some of this implementation are removed?
Well, thank you once again, Ruth. In the past, for some time now, we observed that we have been conducting mainly tabletop simulation exercises. By tabletop simulation exercises, I mean that we come together as stakeholders, NEMA and its stakeholders, we simulate a flood disaster scenario, and each of us read out our responsibilities and get ourselves acquainted with them without actually going to the field to put what we have read into practice. So presently, the DG NEMA has insisted that we must go to the field and ensure that we engage with the communities. And like they say, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And that's why the difference this time around is that we are going down to the states. We have been to Jigawa, and I want to use this opportunity also to appreciate the government of Jigawa State for what they are doing. Because during our simulation exercise in Kano, the Jigawa State Emergency Management Agency were present. We ensured that all of them, the states that are along the banks of River Kano, all of them were present, during which we engaged with them, telling them how to mitigate the impacts of flood. And of course, they outline the effort that Jigawa state government is doing, the effort they are putting in to ensure that the effects of flood are mitigated. And we encourage other state governors, to put in same effort. Desilting of the rivers. Most of rivers that are going down are carrying a lot of debris. As these debris continue to gather, the water becomes wider and push into the hinterland, displacing people. So what NEMA is doing is to ensure that we enlighten the state governors that they should carry out this desilting of the rivers to ensure that the depth is improved so that the water channel can, of course, gain enough depth without expanding outwards and creating flood. Furthermore, we engage with the families. What we have observed also is that whenever we are training, the family or the individuals who are most affected are not carried along. So we ensure that...
Why is that, Air Commodore?
Well,
sorry.
It's easier to do it at the higher level. We sit in our various offices, in headquarters, in Abuja. We invite stakeholders, discuss with them. But going to the field, of course, is capital intensive. Organizing a full-scale simulation exercise is more or less like acting a movie. You have to get these stakeholders, of course, to get to the field. We have to move community leaders. We have to engage the divers. We have to engage the local boat owners. We have to engage everybody and bring them out. We have to engage, organize technical sessions with them. Of course, during all this period, you need resources, to mobilize all these people. These are part of the things that NEMA is doing to ensure that the family are carried along. Furthermore, we also go as far. Recently, the DG NEMA dispatched 3 mobile intensive care units to Owerri, Kaduna, and Uyo. All these are efforts geared at ensuring that our various offices that are in the field get the equipment they need to ensure that they meet the needs of the communities that they are serving.
Indeed, preparedness, mitigation, and response can only happen with a collaborative approach. Mr. Stephen Jabbo, I'm afraid we have to leave the conversation there, but of course not the advocacy, because we'll continue to speak about this issue. Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen Jabbo. He's the technical advisor to DG NIHSA, and also Air Commodore. Thank you so much for joining us on Weekend File. I wish you both, talking about the agencies, the best. We'll continue to monitor development